This is Keith Helwig from Cops Corrections Videos. If you like my videos, please hit the red subscribe button. Not too long ago, a good friend of mine, Gary York, made a video on which he talked about the different types of inmates. I'd like to talk about the different type of officers you're going to encounter during your career. Now, I use the term officers as a generic term, meaning police officers and correctional officers. If I'm referring specifically to one or the other, I will mention that specifically. First type of officer you're going to meet, whether on the streets or in the prisons, is going to be the hard ass. That's the officer that's going to enforce every single rule, every single regulation to the letter of the law. I had a female correctional officer when I was a captain who wanted me to lock up an inmate because he used 2 spoonsful of sugar in his coffee. Now, the rules at the institution at that time were that for breakfast, inmates were allowed 2 spoonsful of sugar, one for their coffee and one for their cereal. Well, he put both of them in his coffee. Well, it only said 1 spoonful in your coffee, 1 spoonful in your cereal. He didn't eat cereal. So when she called me up to have him locked up, I didn't lock him up, and accordingly she had a fit. Now, on the same hand, there are police officers who will enforce every rule or every law to the letter of the law, ignoring that they have the discretion sometimes to do what's right. No, I'm not advocating that people break the law or people ignore the law. Laws are there to be enforced. But as an officer, you also have discretion. Then there's the lackadaisical officer. In corrections, I have run into many lackadaisical officers, both captains, lieutenants, sergeants, officers. These are the type that if they like an inmate, they're going to let that inmate have a little extra leeway. He may play his radio a little bit louder, he may get a little extra laundry, and they're going to look the other way. But then they're going to nail the next inmate for having his radio too loud or having an extra pillowcase. There's also lackadaisical police officers. These are the officers who will write somebody up for 12 miles an hour over the speed limit, and the next time they see somebody go by and the person looks like somebody's going to give them a hard time, they let them go. Well, as a police officer, I have a set limit on my speed. Anybody that violates that set limit that I've set for myself is going to get a citation. Unless there's some really good, unless there's some really good overriding circumstance as to why they were speeding. I do that because I can justify in my mind that I am being fair and I'm being firm and I'm being consistent about it. Then another officer you're going to run into, whether it's in police work or whether it's in corrections, is the ladder climber. This is the person who, as soon as they get out of the academy, they start taking the test for a sergeant. As soon as they make sergeant, they start taking tests for lieutenant, captain, security director, or in police departments, it's the same thing, except not security directors, and they'll be going for investigators or whatnot. But they view every step of their career as another step on the ladder to get further ahead. Unfortunately, they don't care whose back they step on or whose back they stab to do it. They're merely interested in getting the status afforded them by their new position. Like many people who spent their life working in law enforcement, whether in corrections or whether as a police officer, I've seen far too many people promoted who really didn't deserve it. They've used their positions to get ahead. I can recall one specific individual. When I was a captain, we had a new captain come into our institution, and he would do an investigation, and they were just awful. And he would hand them to me and say, "Hey, Captain Helwig, can you take a look at this and tell me what's wrong with it," or whatever. So I would look at it, and his grammar was terrible, his punctuation was terrible. The investigations weren't very good. So I would change them with him. I would sit down with him and tell him this is what needs to be done. I had experience, not that I'm the great inspector or investigator of the world. And he would change it and turn it into the security director. And the next thing you know, he's getting all kinds of kudos from the security director for this fantastic investigation that he turned in. Now, did he ever mention that he had help from anybody else? Not on your life. Did he ever mention that perhaps he's had screwed the investigation up and somebody else set him straight? Again, not on your life. Well, today this person is the security director, which is the third in charge of one of the state's maximum security institutions, because he didn't care who he stepped on or who he used to get there. You're going to meet people like that. You're going to meet people like that in sheriff's departments, police departments, parole offices, correctional agencies, all over the field. Then you're going to get the old timer. This is a guy who's probably my age, maybe 10, 15 years younger even, who's been there, done that, and they aren't going to do it again. Well, yeah, they've been there, done that, but they still do it again. They still have a job to do. Even when I was a captain, if we had a busload of inmates come in, myself, and there were other captains as well, who wouldn't hesitate to get in there and perform strip searches, or to perform pat-down searches, or to help shake down a cell. As a supervisor, as a leader, as a correctional officer, you have to do your job, and parts of that job are certainly unpleasant. The same as a police officer. There was one police or sheriff's department officer who has since been retired for a few years, who was pretty well known that if you passed him on Highway 41 and needed backup 5 minutes later, he would call and tell you he was 20 minutes out because he didn't want to get involved in it again. Now, one time he'd been a good cop. He was nearing retirement. He didn't want to endanger his retirement. That's no excuse. That's no excuse for not being a good cop. Now let's talk about cops that are good cops. We often hear the term firm, fair, and consistent. Well, what is firm, fair, and consistent? Firm means that you enforce the rules, you enforce the laws, you enforce the regulations, policies, and procedures. Fair means that you do it in a fair manner. If you're going to treat one person one way, you treat every person that way. Now, that doesn't mean if you're a jerk, you'll be a jerk to everybody. What that means is that if there is a rule that's out there and you're going to make one inmate follow it, you make all inmates follow it. Or in my case, if I have a set speed and someone violates that speed, they're going to get a citation for it. And if another person comes by and does the same thing, they're going to get a citation for it. And that also goes along with consistency. People know what to expect. I don't know how many times I worked with officers where people just didn't know what to expect out of them. They didn't know whether they were going to have a good day or a bad day. And if that officer was having a bad day, you better believe they were going to have a bad day. Then there's the officer who is dependable. This is the type of officer who realizes that they have to work Christmas holidays, they have to work family birthdays, things of that nature, and they're not going to call in sick to screw somebody else over. Again, going back to when I first started in corrections, if you called in sick on a holiday, you were pretty much blackballed. If you got ordered or forced for a 16-hour shift, nobody was going to take it for you because you took away somebody else's chance at having Christmas with their wife and kids, or husband and kids, whatever the case may be. By being dependable, you're going to be there when you're supposed to be there. You're going to be there to back people up. You're going to be there to just be someone that they know has your back. So as I sit back, this is a little longer than most of my videos, but as I sit back and think about it, I want you to think about it. What kind of officer are you? Are you an officer that's simply going in for a paycheck? Well, maybe that's okay for you. Or are you the type of officer who's going in there and you're going to think, well, I'm just going to do my 8 hours and I'm going to get the heck out and that's going to be it? Well, if that's what you are, that's what you are. Or are you the type of officer who's dependable, the type of officer who is an example to others, the type of officer who people look up to, people respect, and people will follow? What type of officer are you? Until next time, this is Keith Helwig from Cops Corrections. Stay safe and watch your back.